be going over the games played by the second official world champion, Emanuel Lasker, German chess player. He was the world champion for 27 years until the young upstart from Cuba, Jose Raul Capablanca, beat him in the world championship match to take the title. So he was world champion for 27 years. That is a record that I think will probably stand forever. Could Magnus be world champion 27 years? I think it's possible. I think it's unlikely. I think for Magnus, somewhere around the Gary mark of 20 years is the realistic expectation. But yeah, his first game was against Johann Hermann Bauer. This is a pretty famous game. I think most people are familiar probably with this game or the themes of this game. So this game goes f4, d5, knight to f or e3, knight f6, b3, e6, bishop to b2, bishop e7. Now Lasker plays bishop d3, and one thing a lot of people like to say about Lasker is they say that he played suboptimal moves, and a move like bishop d3 here, objectively it's not a common way of playing the position. That being said, it does feel like a very modern age idea, putting the bishop in front of the pawn, trying to develop the knight and attack on the diagonal. So while objectively it's not a great move, there are merits to bishop d3. This is not what I showed Pokemon. What I showed Pokemon was a little bit different. It still had it didn't have f4. It was actually quite different. What I showed Pokemon was this one, was sort of the London system. So it's a little bit different in general terms. So anyway, bishop d3 played here by Lasker, b6 played by Johann Hermann Bauer, knight c3, bishop b7. Now knight c3 also a move that I think by today's standards, not a move that most people would expect. Of course, I am floored. I've not looked at this game before the computer, but now I see the computer saying just violate all the opening principles and play g4, which is I just saw that out of the corner of my eyes, and I saw up top it's saying g4 is the best move. Again, not a move that a human should play. Don't do that. Don't do that. Just be play more traditional moves. However, having said that, getting back to what we were talking about earlier, there was the notion of the holy grail in chess. And so like when you talk about holy grails, like this is the thing. So if the computer had some way to tell you why g4 is the best move, besides just what I would assume it, like you push the pawn, you take space. That's my assumption of the situation. But again, it violates all the opening principles. So exactly why is it supposed to be correct? But it is what it is. Anyway, Lasker goes knight c3, bishop b7, knight to f3, knight bd7, castles, and now Lasker goes knight e2. Again, another move that objectively is not a great move. Because black here can play knight to c5, after which point black will be hitting the bishop on d3, and you will not be able to keep the bishop alive because the bishop can't retreat. So knight e2 is in fact a very dubious move here by Emanuel Lasker, because in this position when you put the bishop on d3, the whole point is that you want to use the double ops. Now again, this is a very old game, so it's of course times have changed, everything has moved on, but if we go back, like a lot of people wonder, well, like, you know, just go back to the very beginning. It's like very oftentimes, for example, what we've learned over time is, so let's just take an opening like the London system. The bishop is on d3, but you'll notice how the pawns are in front, so this bishop can't really be touched. And even like knight 6 c3, you see you prevent any jumps, and the bishop is very, very safe inside the pawn wall here, running up to d4. So now if we go back to the game again, this is an example of how the times have changed. In a modern day game, I would say I really think anyone over the rating probably of 2200 would play knight to c5 instantly here. They wouldn't even think. And that's why in many cases when you want to get setups with the bishop on d3, you have to put a pawn on d4 because it stops any of these jumps like knight to c5 or to e5 here basically. So that's what I would say is really, really important to note, and that's how the game has changed in many ways, because in the old days they didn't realize that. Like they had no ideas. This game was played in the great year of 1889, but now if you go forward, you fast forward like 100 200 years, you'll see that everybody knows now if you want a bishop on d3 targeting h7, this bishop needs to be very safe, which is why you put the pawn on d4 first. Anyway, knight e2 c5 is played, knight g3, and now the problem here for black is playing a very thematic setup, just very solid development. But at Lasker, in the process of putting the knight, rotating the knight from c3 to g3, it's even closer to attacking this black king here. There might be a knight f5 or a knight h5, knight g5. Everything is lining up towards the black king here on the two diagonals. So here Queen c7 is played, knight to e5 played by Lasker. Another very thematic move. White can play knight g5, try to attack h7, but after black pushes the pawn to h6, you very quietly have to move your knight backwards, and then you go on from there. So 1889 no toilet, I don't know what that means, but thank you for that comment. Anyway, so basically what happens here is like Lasker plays this move, knight e5, and now what this does is it really does open up the scope. So two bishops on b2 and d3 are placed very well. Additionally, you have ideas like knight to h5 or queen to h5 here, and the position is getting really dangerous because black has very nice development, but white's pieces are really aiming towards the black king almost perfectly here. So knight takes e5 is played. They had no theory back in the day. No, I mean, this is sort of how everything is developed over time. Now computers obviously have changed things quite significantly, but what I would say is that all these ideas of development, like for example, I'll give you an even better example. So after knight c3, this also is not the best move because we understand how strong this bishop is on d3. So when we understand how strong this bishop is here, black can go bishop to a6 and trade off this very powerful bishop, and it's a great trade. Because if you look at the game, let's go back to this position. Bishop here on b7, this diagonal is blocked, so the bishop does not have great scope, whereas this bishop is really strong. So so if we go to like this position, a lot of the way modern theory and understanding positions has evolved, we understand how strong this bishop is. So what you would do is trade off the bishops. Why are we analyzing the ancient game? Because because I'm basically doing a series of going over games played by the world champions. So again, these are little things that nowadays everyone would understand immediately based on our understanding of the game, but at the time they were sort of creating theories of how to, like, where you put your pieces, what the ideas are, and so forth. So knight to e5 is played here. Black takes, and again, another example of how the game has changed. Emanuel Lasker very correctly, in my view, takes with the bishop on e5. Will I look at Magnus's games? Yes, I will. In this position, you think, well, of course you take with the bishop. You want to keep the bishop open on the diagonal. It's a really nice wooden shield here. So the bishop looks really nice on e5. At the same time, however, as we see from the computers now, the computers basically say you actually don't take with the bishop. The best way to take is to play pawn takes, knight d7, and now you become a barbarian with queen to h5. And if pawn to g6, you go queen h6. If black plays knight takes pawn, you go knight to h5 here. And at this point, it's a winning position because queen g7 is mate, and black cannot take because then you take and your bishop protects the queen and the king gets checkmated on g8 here. So what you end up with is sort of a situation where taking with the pawn is very strong, and after queen h5, since g6 is not playable, you have to go h6. Now white can play something like rook f4, go for the double stack. There's massive pressure towards f7, and of course the pawn on e5 is guarded here by the queen and the bishop. So yeah, so bishop e5 is played, queen to c6, queen to e2. Again, maybe not the best move, but again, Lasker was worried about this pawn push opening up the long diagonal. For example, say you just push a pawn, black can go d4, and there's this huge batter. I can't draw arrows today. From b7 to g2, basically, with the queen and the bishop here. So queen e2 is played, a6, knight to h5. So Lasker decides, you know what, I've got the two great bishops, they're really good. Now I want to get rid of this black knight. In this position, the king is relatively safe, but there's only one piece that really is guarding here, which is the knight on knight on f6. That's the only piece that's guarding the pawn at h7. It's the only sort of piece that's protecting the king here on g8. So were these GMs better than modern IMs? I would say on par with the modern day IM. That's what I would say. On par. So knight h5 is played, knight takes h5 played by Bauer. Again, a tough spot here in terms of what black can really do here. And knight h5 is kind of the biggest mistake, because now Lasker correctly goes for the kill with bishop h7. It's worth noting that you can take with the queen, but after black plays pawn to f5, this diagonal gets closed, and this bishop that was so awesome on this diagonal no longer really has any threats. It technically targets pawn a6 long term, but the whole point of this bishop is it's going after the black king here. So Lasker correctly plays bishop takes pawn, king takes the knight with check, king to g8. and now bishop takes g7. Another really nice move by Lasker. Levy could here's what I would say. I think Levy and Blitz would probably beat, he would beat any world champ. I mean, to compare the modern day chess player with GMs, I would say Levy could probably, in Blitz at least, beat any GM. I don't know though. Is Levy better than Capablanca? I'm not sure, honestly. Like, I'm not sure if Levy could. I'm actually not sure. I suspect that someone like Lasker and Blitz, he probably could, but I don't think that Levy would beat Capablanca. I think Capablanca is sort of the first world champion who in modern times would 100% be a GM. Lasker probably, I think, is on the edge, but Capablanca would be a modern day GM. I thought Capablanca actually played a lot of Blitz, but maybe I'm wrong. I thought they did play Blitz. I don't know. I think Levy would not beat Fischer. That's a good joke. That's a good joke. Actually, Levy could have some chances due to like Capablanca being dead. Very funny. Very funny. Anyway, so Lasker plays bishop takes g7. Oh gosh. Threatening checkmate here. Threatening checkmate at 1 on h8. So now here black really doesn't have many choices, because if you don't capture the bishop as mate in 1, if you say push a pawn to f6, for example, white has a really nice move playing bishop to h6, because now you're threatening to checkmate. So let's just say black plays a random move, rook e8, you go queen g6, king h8, queen g7, which is checkmate. The bishop and the queen are protecting each other. So black has to stop this mate threat. The problem is, if black plays queen e8 to stop this check, you still have queen g4 check, and it's the same problem where you go queen g7 and the bishop and the queen guard each other. And then the last way to try and stop the mate is to play rook f7, because of queen g4 you move and the rook covers a square. However, here you still go queen g6 check, hitting the king. If rook g7, it's mate. So king to h8, you go queen takes f7, and again it's leading to checkmate or a loss of material here. All right, so let's go back. So here on move 17, he plays king takes bishop, because you can't really push the pawn, so he takes. And now Lasker plays queen g4, very important check. So now if black tries to run with like king f6, you have queen g5, which is checkmate. The queen is in check and the pawn supports the queen. There are no squares for the king to go to here. So after queen g4 check, black plays king to h7, but now you'll notice the king is kind of cut off. It can't really get back to the center of the board, and now Lasker goes for the classic rook lift to play rook f3 and rook h3, and it's the ladder here. And as you'll see, black is currently up 2 bishops, but when you look at the pieces where they are, this king is all alone on an island, and there's nothing to defend the king. So even though white has sacrificed a lot of material, black's king is completely open. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter if you're +6, +9, +20 if your monarch is getting checkmated. So e5 is played here by Bauer. Only way kind of to try and stop checkmate. There's no other way to stop the checkmate. If you go bishop h4, I just very quietly go rook to h3, or actually I can take also, but just for the theme, so you just go rook h3, and it's the same problem. Your king is toast. So in this position, e5 is played here by Bauer. Lasker plays rook to h3, queen h6, Lasker takes, and now again you see black has a rook and 2 bishops for the queen. The rook is very far away, so if you could magically place this next rook, do the second lift here and put the rook on f3 and go rook h3, it would be mate, but you can't do that. So in this position, what you have to do here is, or not here what you have to do, but what Lasker comes up with is queen to d7. And now black is going to be losing one of the bishops. There's no way to protect both of these bishops at the same time because the queen is attacking both of them. And so Bauer basically is losing the game. He goes bishop f6, Lasker takes, Bauer goes king g7, Lasker goes rook to f1, and even though black has a rook and a bishop for the queen, the openness of this black king here, where you can do the rook lift and attack the king, basically leads to the end of the game. So now rook a b8 is played here, queen d7. Yeah, the cleanup crew is a good way of putting it. Now it's just time to clean it up, because basically the worst part of the game, or the most difficult part of the game, is over. Now it just requires a little bit of technique to finish the game. So rook d8 is played, queen g4, king f8, pawn takes pawn, bishop g7, pawn to e6. Another nice move by Lasker, threatening to win the pawn on f7 with the rook. The black king needs protection. You also can't take, so of course that puts the king in check. So rook f7, Queen g6 played here by Lasker. F6, rook takes f6, and it's just really really brutal finish to this game. Again, black cannot take the queen or the pawn because the pawn is pinned to the king by this rook on f1. So f6 is played here, rook takes f6, queen takes f6, and now the king is under attack, the rook is also under attack. So Bauer goes king e8, and now Lasker finishes this really nicely. He goes queen to h8 check, king to e7, queen to g7, and now the king is under attack, but you're going to lose the rook once you move the king. And now this really is just a cleanup crew because it's a queen against a rook. You also have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4, so you're going to lose at least another pawn. So now it really is just time for the sanitation crew to come into town. So rook to d6, queen takes a6, d4, pawn takes, Lasker goes h4 again, just using the pawns, pawn to d3, and now queen takes d3, played by Lasker here. And Bauer resigns in lieu of the fact that if you can obviously take the queen, but after pawn takes, you're down how many pawns? You're down 5 pawns. It's 6 pawns against 1 pawn. White will be able to make a queen on 8 or h8 with the 2 sets of extra pawns, and so therefore after queen takes d3 in this position, Bauer resigns. So what are the themes that we learned from this game? Because again, I'm trying to do this from an educational standpoint. It's not simply to like show the game and everything. So themes are the following. The themes are when white tries to set up this fianchetto on the queen side with bishop b2, and many times you want to put a bishop on d3 and target towards the black king side, like the pawn on h7 and the pawn on g7 with the 2 ops. So from the white standpoint, that's your goal. Eventually you really would like to get a knight. I mean, there are many ways of playing this, but the general themes for white are when you get the bishops like this, what you play for is something like knight e5, rook f3, rook h3, so you can attack towards the king with the 2 bishops, the knight, and this rook on f1. So you can get the knight to e5, do the development of the bishops on diagonals, and do the rook lift to h3. That's one of the basic common themes. Now in this game, of course, we see a slightly different theme that occurs, which is that what Lasker wanted to do was slightly different. He had a more sort of advanced concept. He wanted to get this knight, get rid of all of the knights, and then do the rook lift and use the queen, the 2 bishops, and the rook to make the checkmate. So those are the 2 biggest themes for white. Now if we look at it from the black side of things, what did black do wrong? Black did not understand these ideas. Now again, this game was played in 1889, so in all fairness to Bauer, it's hard to really blame him in terms of not knowing how to defend against. But there are two themes that if you're looking at it from the black side, so what you understand is what I just said. White wants to maybe get a knight to e5, castle the king, do the rook lift, and you face lots of pressure towards your king side from the 2 bishops, and then the knight, and then the rook coming up. So that's theme 1, and then theme 2 is sort of what happens, the more advanced idea that Lasker uses in the game. So if you're black, what you oftentimes want to look for in an opening like this where your opponent tries to create this setup is, are there ways to get rid of the 2 bishops here? And one way that you can do that, as I said earlier, is bishop to a6. So as black, because you understand the power of this bishop on this diagonal, you can look to exchange this bishop to sort of minimize the attacking threats towards the king side. Secondarily, let's keep going. Okay, so what else do we have here then? The second thing is that you are again always looking to exchange. So in this position, knight c5 was another way to get rid of the bishop, but then beyond that, once you reach a position like knight g3, now you understand you aren't able to trade off this bishop. So these threats are very real here. So one of the other ideas you can play for as black is you can play something like knight to e4 to close down this diagonal. The bishop no longer has scope, and you're guarding the knight on e4 with your bishop and your pawn. Secondarily, let's say white plays knight to e5 here. I'm just going to show an example. After takes on something like f5, this bishop is doing nothing. You have pawns in front, the diagonal is closed. Black can even go bishop f6 to trade off this other bishop, which currently has an open diagonal. So both of the white bishops here get neutralized after this move knight to e4. So that's sort of the basic themes that are really important to note in terms of what you're aiming for as white and how you're trying to prevent those ideas as black. That's what I would say in regards to this game. So I hope you enjoyed that. It's the first of 2 Lasker games I'm going to show. Now this game feels very like slow, very positional, very dry. Now one thing that Lasker did, I think, a lot better than a lot of players at times and even the preceding world champions, is he was able to play very tactical chess as well.